Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Gracias por unirse a...
Thank you for being present in this panel discussion towards an inclusive and sustainable digital justice. Would like to thank those here in Casa de America and also those in the two YouTube channels, Spanish and English. Without further ado, I have the honor to present the director of Casa de America, Mr. León de la Torre, for some welcoming and opening remarks. Good afternoon. Be all of you very welcome to Casa de America, dear representatives of the Spanish Ministry of Justice, Secretary of the State, members of your team, delegates from Bahamas, Belize, Ecuador, and Paraguay, dear ambassador and friend, dear members of the Inter-American Development Bank, magistrates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real honor to welcome you again to Casa de America, a place that tries to promote dialogue and exchange of ideas to get both continents closer towards to have a better future for next generations. This third study visit that the bank coordinates with the Ministry of Justice and this House is a proof of the commitment we have with modernizing our systems. Technology has affected many areas of our life, including justice. In a world more and more interconnected, it's important that our judicial systems to adapt and evolve so that all citizens might have access to a transparent and equitable justice. We have the presence of magistrates that are the pillars of the justice system in their countries. Their experience and leadership will be critical to lead the transformation process. I would also like to highlight the participation of those responsible for the digital transformation that aims at making justice a more efficient, agile, and transparent system. The collaboration between Casa de America and the Inter-American Development Bank has been the cause of many interesting projects. There was a 50th anniversary of Madrid Declaration was also held in Casa de America. We've been working together in different fora on sustainable development and public policies, tackling critical subjects for Latin America and the Caribbean, and a seminar on social innovation where different successful initiatives were presented from different countries of the region. The area of justice, with its complexity, has been covered and an important part of our program. Casa de America has been the venue of conferences and roundtables on human rights and social justice, and as a proof of our commitment is the cycle of conference on justice on Latin America, covering areas as legal reform and the access of justice to most vulnerable communities. Basically, we face today something that is crucial for the future of our society. Digital justice is not only a trend, it's a need today in a world that goes into this direction. Through these panel discussions, we will be able to share our experiences and challenges and good practices. We might be able to compare them to build a better future where justice is not only a right, but also a service that will adapt to the citizens' needs. At a troublesome moment internationally, with some challenges to the rule of law in some continents, also in Europe, justice should be the main pillar of democracy and the rights of our societies, and therefore it is crucial that it updates to the times facing the challenges of the digital era. I would like to thank you for being here, for your participation and commitment in such an important topic, and I'm sure that the discussion that would be generated today, one more year, would be important and will contribute to the progress of the digital justice in our respective countries. I will give the floor now to Emilio Pineda, manager of the area of institutions for development at the Inter-American Development Bank. Good afternoon to all of you. Good morning for those of you that are listening from America. And I will start from deep thanks to our host, to the Ambassador León de la Torre, the Director of Casa de América, to the Secretary of State, Manuel Olmedo. Thank you all and your teams for being such a generous host of this group. I would also like to give a warm welcome to all the authorities from the different ministries of justice that are with us today, physically, but also remotely from other countries, and also to the Ambassador of Ecuador that is here with us in this venue. For me, it's a great honor to participate in the opening of this session that would be a cornerstone in the discussion of one of the main challenges we face in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is the fact of having an efficient justice system and getting a digital transformation of the justice systems in our region. And I would like in this moment make three brief reflections in this regard. First is that our region faces a huge challenge in the area of justice system. Numbers from the World Justice Project show that our region is the second worst region in relation to unjustified delays, and the criminal systems are considered the most inefficient in the world. Therefore, we are not in a very good state in relation to the efficiency of our criminal and judicial systems. And this inefficiency is reflected in the population's lack of trust towards the judicial system. Reports from the Latin Barometer show that 75% of Latin American citizens do not trust justice institutions, and inefficiency and the lack of transparency are considered the main root causes of this serious problem. Having said this, the good news is that today we have one of the leaders of digital transformation in the justice of the world that opens its gates to share for a week the best practices of digital transformation, what has worked, what have the challenges been, and how can we take this rich experience to our countries. And the Spanish experience is valuable not only because it's successful and is very relevant, but also because it's a close cultural experience to Latin America and the Caribbean. The experiences, the multiple exchanges throughout our history make it easier to take Spanish experience to our countries. And this has been reflected in the interesting discussions we have had for the last years. And thanks again, Secretary, for being with us today, and those conversations have been key in this process. There are several countries that have already participated in these countries, as Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Panama, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay and Jamaica. And those exchanges have been really fruitful, and they have started processes to reform their institutions deeply rooted in the learnings here. So the main message I wish to convey is that we face a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity to reform our systems and to strengthen our systems. And I'd like to conclude by saying that we, as the Inter-American Development Bank, for us, it's a privilege to be your partners, to accompany you in your transformation process, and always you will have our total support to work together in the updating of the justice systems, in the digitalization, making them more transparent and accessible for the public. And directly together we can really make a difference in the area of justice and bring a better well-being to our population, which is the ultimate purpose and the reason why we're all here. Thank you, and have a very fruitful week. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Emilio,
Emilio, for this welcome and for highlighting the value of alliances. Now we're going to give the floor to Manuel Olmedo, Secretary of State of Justice, before starting the panel discussion.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. after the meeting this morning, I hope that the rest of the program has been fruitful. First, at the Ministry of Justice, with the presentation of the Justice 2030 plan, and also at the Supreme Court. I hope the visit was interesting for all of you. Also lunch, and I hope it's not too difficult now to be at this afternoon session. Cocido madrileño is probably thought for colder times, but we also thought it was a good way to introduce you into the gastronomic culture of our country. Allow me to start by thanking, of course, our host, the Ambassador, Director of Casa de America, for this beautiful venue and for supporting this exchange of experiences, this program for mutual knowledge that basically, as I said this morning, will allow us to give knowledge, but also to get and receive knowledge from those that visit us. For us, as important is to share what we have been doing in the last few years and our plans for the future, but also to be able to receive your feedback, the feedback from the countries that are visiting us. And therefore, thank you. I'd like to thank all the delegations from Paraguay, Ecuador, Belize, and Bahamas. And of course, I'd like to thank the team from the Inter-American Development Bank, that we have cultural and historic bonds. People that have worked in the past in our ministry, in the Ministry of Justice, are currently working in the bank. And therefore, this proximity, this closeness is even stronger. We are going to continue with today's program, and I'd like to refer to a couple of experiences that we feel especially proud of in this process of digitalization. First, the electronic judicial file is not only to be able to work through a platform and therefore totally eliminating the use of paper. Today, almost at 100%, there were many documents that were included to the process coming from other institutions. They were on hard copy, and even though our file was digital, we had to incorporate them somehow, and therefore we had to scan them as PDFs. But the work that we have been developing, networking with many of those institutions, tax authorities, law enforcement, the police, the post offices, services of our countries, we have been able to focus all those documents and base them in data. So more than a traditional document, now we have a data scheme. The success of being able to incorporate all this information into the electronic file comes from being focused on data. What is important in the past in the area of justice was the concept of document with some information and some certification from judicial authorities or the legal clerks or notaries, and that was incorporated into the file. But today we are not working so much on this traditional document, and we are focused on the information included in this document, the metadata related to the information, and the interoperable loading of this with the rest of the administrations. This being oriented to data is a critical element in this new system, as you can see in the Royal Decree 6/2023 that incorporates and gives legal safety the basic principles of new technologies. We could even say that we are one of the first countries in the world that has regulated in the specific field of justice the application of techniques or technologies as artificial intelligence in this royal decree. And this is especially important to have legal security. Change management is difficult, all those processes in any area of our life, in any field. But if we want to be successful to manage change in such a specific area as the justice system, we need to give total legal security on what we're doing. Why? Some of the stakeholders of this process of transformation are judges and magistrates that are entrusted with the protection of the people's fundamental rights. And if we don't provide legal security, we will find an important reluctance towards change that we need to overcome, giving legal security through the regulatory transformation that will be parallel to the transformation of our justice system. And on top of this electronic file, I would like to mention another tool, what we call the justice folder, is an APP that you could check on your smartphone, now is on the web. And in this folder, all professionals, lawyers, attorneys, and the public can consult on real-time all information in the justice systems, understood in its broad sense, and all the proceedings that they are part of. They can check not only on judicial cases where they are part as plaintiffs or defendants, but also criminal records or things that might be included in the civil registry, marriage certificate, birth certificate, and some others. I hope that next Wednesday, with your visit to the City of Justice in Albacete, you will be able to see in situ and check those two elements that I'm now referring. On one hand, the justice folder, and then the judicial electronic file. All of this, we are doing it understanding that digitalization is not an end in itself, it's a tool that will allow us to place the citizen at the center of our public policies in the area of justice. That means that with digitalization, the aim is to build a more sustainable, more efficient, and more social justice based on the specific needs of our citizens. We even speak about the justice of care. There is a need for justice as a public system to take care of the citizens, taking into account their specific needs. We've been doing this for long with the victims, taking care of their specific situation to avoid re-victimization when they get closer to the judicial situations. But we should do this with minors, with senior citizens, which are not digitally native. We cannot create another breach. We need to reduce existing gaps and not create new ones. Also with people that are in a situation of vulnerability for different reasons, whether disability or some others, and in general for all the members of the public, with the exception of those that are closer to the courts, to the justice, to face a judge. For any member of the public, even though they are not in a situation of vulnerability, is already, let's say, a difficult moment or an experience, and they don't really know too well what they can find, what they can expect, or what can happen to them. And through this strategic axis of our work, we try to tackle this, what we call the justice of care. And I would like to conclude with this, and you will see this in the next panel discussion and the next sessions. We are using robotics and artificial intelligence techniques and technologies to the justice system. About robotics, introducing processes with pre-established models approved thanks to this royal decree that I've mentioned before, that will allow us to apply robotic techniques to administrative proceedings that had to be always done manually in the past, especially the files to grant the Spanish nationality. We had a delay in Spain only 2 years ago, up to 3 years, since someone had all the necessary requirements until they were granted with the Spanish nationality. Now, thanks to digitalization and electronic means, this long period of 3 years is being reduced to 3 months, and more than 250,000 files that we had waiting for a resolution, more than 350,000. Now we are below 200,000. So we've been able to tackle all the incoming, and we have reduced our backlog. Those robotics techniques can also be applied to the judicial process and system. We will do it with simple processes that start with an initial writing, and the lawyers will have to use the forms that are uploaded in our website, and they load all the necessary information, so the robot might do the filing or the handling until the end stage, where a judge logically will have the last say. This human decision logically is not going to be replaced, but until that moment comes when the judge makes his or her decision, the rest can be improved thanks to robotics. So the use of artificial intelligence, we have a tool to sort documents so that in processes with thousands of different documents, the tool can search and find a case or expert reports among all those thousands of documents, and with artificial intelligence at a high level of reliability can find among this huge volume of documents precisely those that we're looking for. We have another tool that uses generative artificial intelligence that translates into simple language an administrative or judicial document. And this is something that all of us in the area of justice for years, we've been trying to be and make pedagogics. And it's true that judges, we use this legal jargon that is not easily understood. And now we have, thanks to artificial intelligence, some techniques that translate the document into simple language that is also available for the judges, so that we can see on occasions when we are using too complicated paragraphs in or Latin expressions that we know by heart, but that the public may not know. So this is also a tool that will help the citizen, but is also a training element for justice professionals, so that at a given time they can adapt the legal language to a simpler one. And lastly, allow me to stress something I said this morning. For us, it's very important to be practical in what we do, to make it useful. We don't have to just digitalize and use numerous tools just because we were told they were successful in some countries or some systems. And even though we are brother countries, we're close countries, each country has its own specificities, different legislative and social or socioeconomic situations, and therefore it's very important that before incorporating those tools or develop some of those tools, we need to find a task force that will take into account who will be the final users. When we were working with the EEC and simple language tool, and also another task force that is working to try to make this language simpler for people with disabilities. And we contacted some of them, and they said, we don't understand anything. And we had been working for months and months in this tool, thinking that it was a tool that could really enhance the understanding of the legal world to those people with disabilities. And we were told, we don't understand this, but we like that better. Is more visual, it has icons. Iconography is very important. We all know that when you are in a foreign country, you may not know the language, but the icons for lifts is universal, and this, for people with some people with mental disabilities, is very useful. Thanks to them, we've been able to change our tools and our digital developments so that they are really helpful without spending public resources for something that may not end up being useful. And therefore, I urge you to use focus groups as a good practice in developing any of those initiatives. And with this, I conclude, and I will now give the floor to the panel discussion. Thank you for being with us today. We're always here, ready to listen to your ideas, perceptions, and suggestions, and those things that we can also improve. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Gracias por este repaso de las novedades que...
Thank you for telling us about the news that we're getting in Spain. As the Secretary of State said, now we're going to hold the first panel discussion led by José Luis Hernández Carrión, who is a specialist on government of the BID, who is going to model the panel on the strengthening of institutional capabilities in the digital transformation of justice, challenges and opportunities. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you. I think I need the rest of the panelists. Are you somewhere? No, I will call you up. Don't you worry. Okay, then, as I was saying, I would like to invite you to the first panel, as our Masters of Ceremony said, about strengthening the digital transformation of justice. We are going to have in the first panel of this afternoon, Luis Esther Blemans, Chief Justice of Belize. Please. Chief Justice, Luis Esther, thank you. We're also going to have Alberto Joaquín Martínez Gimón, Minister of the Supreme Court of Justice of Paraguay. Thank you. Also Ricardo Morales Vela, who is the General Public Defender of Ecuador, and Leticia Carrillo Rodríguez, who is Assistant to the Secretary of the Government of the Supreme Court of Spain. Thank you, Leticia. Well, welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Would like to thank all of you who are following us via streaming or online from America. We're all aware clearly of the fact that the digital transformation processes go beyond just a mere addition of technologies, information systems, and applications that are part of the things that make judicial institutions work. We are all aware of the fact that those digital transformation mechanisms require big changes in the governance and the institutions, and rules have to change within the rules framework. It's very important to manage change, obviously, and we need digital talent and skills of the people who are going to be part of this digital transformation process. Also, obviously, we need computer systems and applications which are going to be part of those change processes, and we also need processes. We shouldn't forget that all of this is very important for the change processes to really change and evolve. And the way people work, professionals work, and citizens relate to the justice need to evolve and need to be much more efficient, efficacious, and transparent. Therefore, digital transformation must be tackled from a point of view which is much more holistic, not just adding technology. Digital transformation needs to start within an organization, and it needs to be supported from the internal departments, where the processes need to be supported by a cultural change, and people need to be supported also. And that is why we're going to be talking and listening to the views of our distinguished panelists that initially I introduced to you. And we're going to start with our Chief Justice. Good afternoon. Thank you for staying here with us.
In 2021, we saw several different news in internet, in press, about the intentions of Belize to go to the digital transformation of justice. So now, 3 years after that moment, those first news in internet, do you have specific plans? Do you have concrete plans to go through the digital transformation in Belize? What do you think about the institutional strengthening of the institution to go with digital transformation in your institutions?
Thank you, moderator. Distinguished colleagues, just permit me first to say thanks to everyone, to the IDB, Ministry of Justice of Spain, and all those persons who have collaborated to make this possible. I'm deeply delighted to be here and to learn from the tremendous experiences of Spain, Ministry of Justice, and your successors, and to be able to share experiences with my colleagues across the Caribbean and Latin America. So thank you all very kindly. Indeed, in Belize, we have embarked on digitalization, and we have embarked on transformation. We have sought to modernize the code through processes, recognizing that digitalization is very important to all of us. And we have introduced e-litigation filing, but there's a long way to go. And just simply hearing this morning from the opening ceremony from the Minister of State, the directors and everything, I realize that Spain is so far ahead so that we are grateful to be here. Also, we want to be able to introduce digitalization not only in litigation, but in non-contentious matters, because access to justice is important to us. And in Belize, we have a lot of remote areas, and we want to be able to reach those persons. We are aware of all the great work the IDB has been doing and has done in collaboration with 2 of our jurisdictions in the Caribbean. So I'm particularly delighted to be here and to learn from all of you and to say to you that we intend to further our digitalization process in Belize to be able to better serve the people and to ensure that the rule of law is maintained and access to justice and that persons' fundamental rights can be improved. We're doing extremely well, but there's always need for support in terms of technology. So while we have internal processes and training and our judges are working very hard and we are seeing great results in our backlogs, access to justice and digitalization must be at the heart of our transformation. And technological support is critical to us. Looking forward, I'm hoping that we can even do more in terms of technological support and digitalization so that we can better serve the people of Belize and all the litigants who come to our country to seek justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Bien,
Minister Martinez, we saw during the pandemic that because of the 1370 from 2020 that was approving the management of distance protocol management about the Supreme Court and so on, new technologies were adopted in the courts. And this protocol was applied to proceedings and hearings of the civil courts and so on. But this protocol was an important milestone for the justice of Paraguay when it comes to talking about the new technologies and the digital record within the justice of Paraguay. What was the impact, the most important one of the implementation of this protocol of distant, remote management? What are the challenges that you've had to face during the implementation of this protocol? Thank you, Jose Luis. First of all, I'd like to start by also thanking the institutions that have organized this very nice event in Madrid, the authorities that have had the vision to call us to discuss during these days this common project, common in all of our countries. I don't think it's just digitalizing justice, but rather improving justice by implementing present technologies. This morning, we were talking about the fact that the big catalyzer of all of these innovations, all of these changes that are being at a global level was the pandemic. The pandemic, if we defined it legally, it would be the unforeseeable or unavoidable event at a global level was fortuitous, force majeure, that forced us to really think about many, many things. You were talking about the 1370. It was a regulation that was similar to other rules in other countries, which was really the result of rethinking about what we had to do so as not to close the doors of the judiciary during all of the time of this global threat event that took us more than 2 years, actually. Well, really, if we were talking about the experience of Paraguay, it would be very, very similar to that of all of our countries. When we talk about digitalization process before, during, and after the pandemic, we see that the realities are the same, especially in our region, especially in Latin America, where our realities, socioeconomic realities, cultural realities, and historical are very, very similar. But if I was asked to pinpoint one impact of the implementation of this type of regulations, I would say that we are not afraid anymore of technology. Before the pandemic, there was sort of like a struggle, fight about the fact that we lawyers believe that the judicial proceeding is sacred, that we need to respect the form always, and once you keep the form, the mean is not so important, but the form is just a mean to get to a much, much wider or higher objective. When we started in 2016, the first digitalization process, I was in the appeal court as a member of back then. The idea of starting breaking the extreme formality was hard. And the same thing happened for a few years until the pandemic changed our scenario. Many lawyers that were clearly opposing the implementation of technology and therefore somehow respecting the right to defense, obviously, which is sacred, but they saw that there was a new landscape, and the form was not just the form was the means to get to an objective which was higher, which was finding solutions which are more fair, more efficient. The big contribution of this experience, I think, was losing fear, not being afraid anymore, so that today we have processes which are more technological, but after all, more efficient from the point of view of what we're always wanting to have, which is cheaper justice, faster justice, better to solve conflicts of our citizens. Thank you, Minister. Okay, then. Public Defender Morales, thank you for being with us today. The institution you represent promote and defends the rights of people, and for that the reason of justices and courts has to work hard every day, clearly. In that sense, what are the main challenges that the public defendant face in matters of strengthening as an institution when it comes to thinking about the evolution towards a totally digital justice? Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us, all of the organizations. Thank you to the Spanish government, the Secretary of State. Thank you to the Ambassador of the Americas House, the distinguished Ambassador of the Ecuador. We really need to start precisely by talking about what we public defenders do in Ecuador. We defend those who don't have the money and who cannot defend themselves. They're vulnerable, therefore. That is why in this new management, we started to implement an open justice policy identified to the digital justice on 3 basic principles: transparency, number 1, number 2, the participation of the citizens and the collaboration, both at the national and international level. It's very important to talk about the citizens' involvement or engagement, because rights start there. Not only is important for the citizens to go to the public defenders or to the institution, but also the institution, the ombudsman, needs to go to the citizens, so that he promotes the rights of the people who are vulnerable. It's very important. One of the projects of the public defenders is the international public defenders, because there's many people from Ecuador who are abroad in countries such as Spain, for instance, Argentina, Mexico, US, where very often their rights are not respected. And apart from that, consulate, we should defend their rights freely, defend that with a public defender, and also with agreements with the international defenders. So within this framework, clearly, digitalization of justice plays a very important role, in principle with the mission and the management model that needs to be taken by the institution. That's the first step for any decision taking. Number 2, hand in hand, it needs to go with all of the institutions that strengthen the justice sector, identifying the needs of El Ecuador in terms of data precision. We need to take into consideration that our institutions have different systems. It's very important to identify the data, to unify data, and from then onwards, taking the best decisions. Thank you, Public Defender. And Your Honor, Leticia Carrillo, you're Your Honor, right? We were checking before I introduced you. Thank you very much for being with us. This is a pleasure and an honor to have this panel. And I want you to tell you that you are very knowledgeable about the State Committee of the Electronic Justice. Yesterday we were talking with the delegations. This morning we talked several times about this well-known committee And it has to be for some reason. When they talk about your committee, it must be because it was effective. It was important in those years, and it is still important in the digital transformation. The State Technical Committee grouped together the forces of the ministry, the judiciary, and the regions, and the attorney's office, and all the different players and agents that were involved in the digital transformation sat together in one table to sit down and discuss. And that's still the case years later. Leticia, how do you think that this effort from your center, CTA, was important and impacted on the digital transformation of justice from the point of view of that Secretariat of the Technical Committee? Well, first of all, thank you all for inviting me to be here, for inviting me to share with you the digital transformation, the issue which is key. We need to be together, we need to share our ideas. Yes, what you, José Luis, are saying, what we call CTAG, which is the State Technical Committee of the Judicial Electronic Management, started in 2013 when we were talking about electronic judicial record. I think it is an institution that has had a lot of importance in the achievement of that electronic record with the way it is now. Back then in 2013, when the CTAG started, what we intended was to put together all of the systems used in the different regions in Spain. Unless you, I mean, maybe you don't know, but there's some regions in Spain that report to the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice is the one that implements all of their systems, but there's other regions that instead have the powers of justice. And they are the ones that just design the applications. Different regions grew differently. And when we started, we wanted to just have a paper record or file. We wanted to process it with a computer, but just to imprint the paper. But when we started to have the electronic judiciary record, we realized that different regions were advancing differently, and we needed something to unify those efforts that were being made in all the regions, because they all had the same goal, which was being able to develop a judiciary record that we wanted to be electronic, since the systems were not interoperable amongst the different regions. The CTAG started to work along those lines, the interoperability that we wanted to get between the different electronic judiciary records so that they could talk amongst each other. Not only that, but also the fact that in order to make an electronic record, not only do you need a processing system, but rather there's many other applications needed for the record to be well understood, well seen or visualized. And all of those applications, what we want with the CTAG is to collaborate amongst all of us to reutilize what others are doing, so that we can, all the regions, the neighboring regions can use it, so as not to reinvent the wheel, so that we can all collaborate. The CTAG is a forum of encounter where we can exchange ideas and share them, ideas about technological developments. How did we start? Yes, we started with the interoperability that we wanted to achieve. And as the Secretary of State has already explained, we are thinking about AI applications that can add AI in the justice administration and the robotization. So we've advanced a lot from 2013, even legally. I think it has been very important to have this forum of CTAG for the electronic judicial record, which is also based on the main pillars: the General Council of the General Power, the Attorney's Office, the regions, which have their devoluted powers, and also other regions that have not devoluted powers. Apart from collaborating with professionals of the administration of justice, lawyers, attorneys, and so on, amongst all of us have been able to progress technologically. We've been able to do so. We still have a long way to go, but we're along the right path, I think. Thank you, Leticia. My first remark from this panel in general is I'm absolutely astonished at the fact that we're doing fine in terms of time, the timing. I can see the camera, but I'm convinced that there has to be some hidden camera because this will be probably the first time that this happens to us. So we're going to have time for a second round of questions that I had more or less prepared. I don't know if we're going to have time for all, but you behaved really well. So, Chief Justice Bleman, second round.
Sure that legal professionals and the general public embrace these digital systems and changes that are coming or you want that come to Belize? How do you think that Belize has to prepare?
Thank you very much. Belize is particularly unique. In fact, at the moment, we are engaged in transforming the criminal justice system, and we have adopted the CCJ Academy for Law Needs and Points declarations, which has best practices and recommendations, and we're about the first in the Caribbean in implementing those best practices. And interestingly, the lawyers at the public and the private bar, they have embraced it. Technology is a major aspect of the recommendations. I don't anticipate any difficulty at all. In fact, in my view, the bar, both public and private, they're very progressive. And I can see them embracing it easily. Also, in terms of public education, the people of Belize are committed to improving the justice system. So once we're able to have public education and programs with them, I can see them readily accepting it. I don't anticipate any difficulties whatsoever. In fact, I'm pleasantly surprised at the responses of the Belizean people, the lawyers of the bar, and all of the persons in the criminal justice stakeholders. For example, we had backlogs that were 14 years, and in a period of a few short months, we're seeing a major reduction. And the lawyers, there's so much collaboration between the public and the private bar in terms of rule of law, access to justice. So I think we're in a good path in terms of seeing that there shouldn't be any major difficulty or even challenges. I can anticipate them embracing it wholeheartedly, and we shouldn't have much selling to do in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Minister Martinez Simon.
Mr. Martinez Simon, second round. What adjustments do you foresee to improve the manageability of the electronic record? Do you have specific plans to make progress? The electronic record or file is a huge plan and will never finish in being fine-tuned or adjusted. It came here to stay, to replace a system that to the technological limitations of the past was not possible in this format, and we used what we had, which is paper, and the electronic one is here to stay, and we will not be able to speak about a finished electronic record, as this might happen. There will be new technology emerging, and we will have to embrace a new project. So when we speak about this in my country, we need to think this about an ongoing project. We will continue implementing and re-implementing this technology and thinking and rethinking about those formats. So to give sustainability to this is to speak about the state or government decision. In my country, the judiciary developed the electronic record. We didn't have back then much collaboration. We do now. We have a collaboration from the central government to develop the new functionalities, and this requires to speak about electronic judicial record that will be part of the public administration. We are speaking also about interoperability with other state entities, law enforcement, Minister of Public Defenders, with the police, with the other institutions, and there's a great and long journey so that everything works in harmony. From how do we move or release people that are deprived from freedom, as details on how do you relate to the Public Defender Ministry. And this requires a very serious conversation in relation to the national budget, so that this project, this never finished project, will always be part of the way the state administers the country, and therefore to have plans is the way we will make progress, not only the ministry, but all the different institutions. Some of the conversations will be quite political because budgets are quite political, but we need to discuss this new law or act among all of us with this clear idea that to have a system, we need to spend smartly with enough investments in the relevant areas. Yes, the budget is something that should be discussed long hours so that policies for digital transformation in the justice system would have a continuity in time without being affected by different governments. And this is something we mentioned yesterday and today. With the different changes in Spain, we've been able to keep a continuity and the same line of work, and that's why today we see some results. And that's another good lesson. Morales, public defender, how do you think we should coordinate the public defender, your institution, with the judiciary and with the rest of the institutions in your country to make progress? How do you see the public defender in 10 years after all this coordination in the area of digital transformation? Well, I see it was going to be wonderful. The transformation of justice should be through education and technology. Through education with the creation of an institute of judiciary studies with judges, prosecutors, and attorneys. So that's when we can find an interinstitutional relation, and also the importance of technology. We can unite education and technology. And I repeat my previous proposals. In the area of open justice, with those three principles: transparency, citizen participation, and interinstitutional collaboration. And maybe what we don't have is resources, but we have a lot of initiatives. And I dream of a public defender where the citizens are really aware of their rights, so they can have a legal defense that is enough, appropriate, and beneficial for them. And also, in the way we administer justice, it should be the best as possible, so that all of us, all the entities, will define and decide the technology in our area, whether data, citizen participation, final uses. And in this dream, in 10 years, I hope that we will end up being the voice of our citizens. Thank you very much, and Your Honor, I come back to you. You spoke about your previous life when you led the Secretary of the State Technical Committee, and therefore one of the most important institutions that promoted digital transformation in the Spanish institutions, and therefore the Supreme Court was one of them, and a very important one. Now you are on the other side. What can you say about your performance? What would your own score be? Okay, are you suffering from the consequences of that change now that you are at the Supreme Court? And now, Leticia, how do you see this from the other side? From the technical committee, you were promoting, you were convinced of the need of certain actions, but now you are sitting on a chair where those actions had an impact. And so what would you improve? Well, yes, I could see moving from the CTAG to the Supreme Court, coming back to the judiciary in such a special place as the Supreme Court. But yes, I've seen a great improvement thanks to the electronic judicial record. But it's true that the Supreme Court is quite specific, as has been mentioned in our Constitution, is the higher body. So to the court we get cassation cases or appeals is different from all the filing of other instances like first instance or audiencia provincial. And we get all those judicial files that have been created in other judicial bodies. So we are like the thermometer of how the justice system is in Spain, and we see how they are in the different regional governments. And I see there has been great progress. Judicial records or files are more unified, they're not equal, but we can speak about some differences among some regional governments and others. And this is something that the technical committee will have to go on working, trying to unify and let this file go on improving. And when in the Supreme Court we see that we only get the same perfect electronic judicial record, we can speak about 100%. We are not there yet, but this is work in progress. It's true that the filing, the proceedings are fully electronic at the Supreme Court. We have the necessary applications to do so. But still, what we get from other regional governments, we get documents on paper, so it's difficult to manage this part. But little by little, we do it, and we can see less and less paper, and we are working better with the electronic judicial record, which will be for the good of the Supreme Court. So your score, the score you will give to yourself is good. Okay, yes, it would be quite good. And I'm just going to send a 1-minute question, a very specific message, so that all the panelists can say what would be their idea or the measure that in your respective institutions you could tackle in the area of institutional strengthening, whether budget, staff, processes. What would be the first measure that you could implement related to institutional strengthening if you had the freedom to choose one? What would you choose, Leticia? Institutional strengthening, I would go on working with the technical committee. So it will be organization, yeah, organizational. I believe is important so that we can all unite our efforts and we can grow in a more unified manner throughout the territory. Public defender, what would be yours to have a management model that is really implemented, to have interinstitutional public policies that can promote the restructuring of the justice administration system so that public defender can always be working close to the citizens. Thank you.
Would be your measure.
Could you just repeat for me, please? I didn't.
Yes, if you could choose one measure in terms of institutional strengthening, which one you would choose?
I didn't get the choices because my equipment was... I would think in terms of institutional strengthening, digitalization for sure, because we need to be able to get that in order to be able to get data and also to be able to improve our processes. If we're to be able to inform our policies, in my mind, digitalization is what's the most important because it cuts across almost every other aspect of your transformation processes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Chief
much.
Justice.
Thanks.
Minister, what would be your measure? Well, depends on how much money and how many resources I have. Well, resources are always more limited than ideas, but of course we will try to sit all together on the same table to decide on the most efficient investment. So about expenditure, we need to work smartly. I believe our country had very capable people leading this project, and we had the good idea of including the judges working in this task force, designing everything with a legal format, and our technical experts were very helpful. And now that the service is covering other areas, we need to sit with all the political levels to have a country view that giving it transparency and efficiency, which is usually the criticism we get as judicial entities. And we see that the results will be on a long term, and as we said, in the previous question, that will also require sustainability and a smart use of resources. If I had to choose one, it would be to provide technological development the right amount of investment and to give it the right importance in the digital transformation of my country. Thank you, Minister. And with this, we will go to the conclusion. I would like to thank you again for participating in this panel. I'd like to thank the audience, those of you here and those of you online. You behaved really well. Last year, I promised I was going to resign as a chairperson, but I know that I did a good job today. We have even finished 2 minutes before. Thank you again, and I hope that this dialogue that we start today, as the Minister said, digital transformation is never-ending, it's an ongoing process, and this type of conversations will go on, and we hope that from the bank we will accompany you for many years in these discussions, and I hope Spain will continue to be our host so that we can learn all those lessons. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, José Luis. Este año te has...
Thank you, José Luis. This year you did an excellent job. We are right on time. Now we will have just a few seconds while we change the panelist and the next chairperson. The chairwoman would be Esther Pérez, General Director of Legal Security and Fe Pública from Spain. She will chair the second panel. The title is Digital Transformation and Use of Emerging Technologies in Justice Administration. In this panel, we will have 3 panelists that you will now see on the camera. José Swing Narua, President of the High Court of Justice in Ecuador, and the ambassador from Ecuador is here with us. Also, Anthony Silvestre, General Prosecutor in Belize, and lastly, María Jesús Fraile Martín, Secretary of Government at Audiencia Nacional in Spain. José Swing Nagua is already with us, as is also our chairperson.
Es para nuestros colegas que nos están siguiendo online.
Those that are following online so that they know what's happening in the room, and we need to give the microphone to 2 other panelists, but María Esther, we give you the floor so you can begin. We're now going to wait for the 2 other panelists. The microphones are not on yet, but we see that the previous panelists are now getting back to the room. As José Luis said, we are now on time. We have with us the second panelist, María Jesús Fraile Martín, Secretary of Government of the Spanish National High Court, or Audiencia Nacional, and we need the representative from Belize to come to the panel.
Y por parte de Belice vamos a tener...
We have the honor to have Candace Nanton with us, Justice of the High Court of Belize. Yes, we're ready. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I also want to welcome you to Spain and to Casa de América, and I would like to thank you for being here today. More than a session, this is a forum to exchange opinions, experiences, and knowledge that would be fruitful for all, because we all learn from each other. Therefore, many thanks for attending and participating in this session. And let us continue speaking about the digital transformation of the justice systems. I'm not going to speak about this on my own. I'm surrounded by experts with excellent knowledge of this matter, with a deep commitment to a real transformation of the justice systems. Maria Jesus Fraile Martin has already been introduced. Welcome and thank you. She is the Secretary of State, the Spanish Audiencia Nacional. She has a huge responsibility in the organization without a coordinating role, and without the court clerk, all this digital transformation would simply not be possible. So thank you and welcome. We also have with us Candence from Nanton from Belize. Is a judge from the Supreme Court. Thank you and welcome. And last but not least, he is the only male representative of this panel. We have Jose Swing Nagua, President of the National Justice Court in Ecuador. The four of us, but especially the panelists, we will continue talking about digital transformation. But we are now going to change gears from the previous panel discussion. We need to speak about opportunities. What are the opportunities of digital transformation for the justice system? And let us speak about challenges. What are the challenges for the justice systems? What is digital transformation? What are the possibilities given by the use of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, new ways of programming, process automation, as the Secretary of State has already referred to? At the Ministry of Justice, in fact, we're very aware, because we have already benefited from the possibilities given by the use of emerging technologies. You've listened the Secretary of State in his presentation when he spoke about some processes and experiences that we already have. Someone that has really benefited from the use of the so-called emerging technologies at the General Direction of Legal Security that I work in and I direct. The Secretary of State also explained how we have introduced robotics and automatization process in granting nationality or citizenship. It is true that when we only had public servants that work in many hours, they try to sort out at a reasonable deadline all those requests. What is true is that it took us forever, 3-4 years. Since last year, after the implementation of the automatization, and they are robots that are checking whether those that presented the request comply with all the requirements. What is true is that this period has now reduced to 3 or 4 months, and therefore the use of those emerging technologies, the use of process automation, is for us a great success that not only benefits the public, that they get the rights in a reasonable period, is also a benefit for the public administration. They do not longer need to use thousands of hours. Now the robots are doing this job and we can devote to other tasks. And of course, we shouldn't miss the ecological advantage of these tons and tons of CO2 that we no longer create. So automation is a success in the direction I lead of legal security. But in my direction, we have also benefited from other emerging technologies. I refer to the new ways of low-code programming. Last year, we had to create and implement the Central Registry of Royal Holdings. This registry aims at knowing the real person behind the legal person, and this is a European regulation related to the fight against money laundering and funding terrorism. This registry is fully electronic. The deadlines we had to create and implement it were very limited for us. If we had to use traditional techniques or traditional IT systems, we couldn't have made it. But the general direction of digital transformation decided to use emerging technologies, decided to use new computing programming models using low-code. And in weeks, we have now the system and the registry is up and running, and therefore I am a direct beneficiary of digital transformation and the use of emerging technologies. But also we are aware that those possibilities and those benefits are also related to some other challenges. The respect of fundamental rights, for example, ethical challenges, legal challenges to avoid digital divide. And of those matters, we will speak with our three panelists that will speak about their experiences. All of you will have the same amount of time, 10 minutes to respond to the question. And the first question is for Maria Jesus. And we're speaking about opportunities, Maria Jesus. How does emerging technologies, in your opinion, as artificial intelligence data analysis, can improve the efficiency and accuracy in the justice administration? Of course, also understanding the challenges and without committing equity and fundamental rights of the public. Okay, you have 10 minutes. Thank you, Esther, for the question, and thank you to the bank and to José Luis Hernández for making the Audiencia Nacional to be with you today. For me, it's a great pleasure. We're also beneficiaries of new technologies and digital transformation, and I hope that those that will visit us tomorrow will share our experiences, specifically related to the benefits. About your question, Esther, I believe that undoubtedly the efficiency of the justice system or justice administration can only be measured based on data. So what emerging technologies do using this data analysis, we can better manage those data. We can better identify the needs and therefore identify the projects that we have to implement. We can get to know the payload of a state of a judicial body, and we can adapt the necessary measures as whether we have to economically invest in this area, in this specific area, to sort out certain number of cases, or if we need to create a new court, or the need for new judges, or the need for more civil servants. I'm thinking also about the delays in the daily life in judicial bodies. So to get to know really the amount of delay, the dates, the reasons, if all of this will allow us, when we analyze this data, will allow us to identify the origin of this delay and therefore to adopt the necessary measures that could be legislative, organizational, or to invest in human or technological resources. And the same about the duration of proceedings, to get to know what a proceeding lasts since the first stage until the resolution of the case, whether in this instance or in another. This will allow us to know if we are complying with a reasonable time, which is in Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights. So the use of data and new technologies will allow us to know and identify problems and solutions related to this. Data quality is also very important.
And throughout years, we've been seeing how it's been growing. Some projects of the ministry with a line that is clearly developed so that data-focused justice starts from a quality data, such as the procedural management systems, so that everything is within the system. The justice files so that we're sure that the quality of the data we're getting is quality, is true. And that will allow us to take decision based on the safety of that data. No doubt, this gives you a global view and it allows you to have data which is of quality and that we're working on quality data, on a way of analyzing it and taking decisions in matters of efficiency of the justice, which is much more safe. And obviously, the more information we have, and if the data is objective and of quality, there's less risk of having a problem of equity and therefore affecting fundamental rights. I hope I helped you. Yes, you did, yes. Oh, yes, a lot. And this message, you're right, which is positive, about new technologies and emerging technologies are not an aim by themselves. They help the efficiency of the systems of justice, and that is what we're working on, and that is what we're going to continue working on. Thank you, Maria Jesus. So let's continue. Now, Candace, it's your turn, and we're going to continue talking about the same. It's true, we have many opportunities, there's many benefits, but we should always remember that there's challenges, ethical and legal challenges, and I'd like to know, Candace, what's your view about which are those main challenges which are ethical, the legal challenges that the justice systems face when we add technologies which are advanced? And above all, what is it that we can do? Candace, what do you think? What can we institutions do to tackle these challenges in a responsible manner?
Question, and thank you for the opportunity. I echo the sentiments of all the previous panelists who have thanked the organizers for this wonderful event and this entire week of learning and improving the state of our justice system. The previous panelists already spoke of some of the opportunities, particularly data gathering and how data gathering can assist in effective resource allocation and in improving efficiencies. However, I've been asked to speak about the opposite side of the coin, which is what are some of those ethical considerations. And if we are policymakers and if we are judicial officers and stakeholders in the justice system, we must ensure that we act responsibly to protect the fundamental rights of our citizens, who are ultimately the beneficiaries of the justice system. They are the persons who stand to gain or lose in the justice system. So I think one of the other side of the coin to data gathering is, of course, data protection. Are we putting policies in place to ensure that the protection of citizens' data is maintained? That may be a need for regulatory, as the Director of Justice had spoken, the Secretary for the Ministry of Justice had spoken about earlier. There would be need for regulations to ensure that the data privacy is protected and that person's data is not being used in an oppressive manner or in ways that violate their fundamental rights. So I would say on the other side of data gathering, we must ensure data protection. Some other challenges, ethical challenges, for example, I know in Belize, we are not that far advanced in terms of the use of digitization and the use of AI, for example, in judgment writing. But that is something that a lot of territories are looking at. For example, in sentencing, you can use AI technologies to assist in sentencing criminal offenders. However, there's always the employment of bias in that AI process. Are we making sure we're monitoring against bias? What about marginal societies where the data is just not enough to really make an effective sentence? So I would say a way of ensuring that we protect fundamental rights is that with the use of AI, we still maintain that human oversight and we maintain and ensure that we are not using the technologies in an oppressive manner, and we make sure that there are systems in place to protect the fundamental rights. I do have a few more, so if I still have time, I can give, yes, okay. Another way of ensuring or regulating the use of these advanced technologies is really transparency. We have to make sure that the public is aware of how these technologies are being utilized, that there is public education on it, so it's not some secret dark hole that information is being gathered from, and they are not part of the process. So of course, advanced technologies will certainly improve efficiency in the justice system, which I know for Belize, where we are, as my Chief Justice would have mentioned before, we are attacking the backlog in our country. We are trying to eradicate the backlog, and of course, AI technologies will help us to do that. But we have to make sure that the process is transparent and that people are aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. La verdad que
Thank you so much. I totally agree. We need to respect and make sure that digital transformation is well made. We want to look for more efficiency of the justice administration systems, but at the same time, we all agree, yes, you're right, the limits are the fundamental rights, which are untouchable, so to say. For sure, we need to make sure that the use of new technologies is going to guarantee all those rights in any situation. Thank you so much. And now let's go to the third panelist. And here we're going to talk about the digital gaps slightly. What is the impact of this digitalization in the citizens, and especially because it happens in all the countries, because not everybody has the same level of access and education to new technologies, nor to digital transformation of the justice systems. How can we in judicial systems guarantee that the digital transformation does not increase precisely those gaps that are already up and running in other levels of the life? Thank you for your question. First of all, I'd like to say hello to everyone. Good morning, especially to those who are connected online. I'd especially like to thank our hosts for welcoming us and for organizing this event, which is going to be successful, I'm convinced, especially to us. We're anxious to generate transformation in the justice administration system. Thank you to the BID. I'm sure we're going to be able to find the mechanisms to find changes which are very important, and we need them in our society. About your question, I think it is important to start from acknowledging that societies such as Ecuador face two key problems. Number one, the connectivity is limited. Starting point. That means I need to be careful, and if I implement digital tools, I'm going to try to avoid damaging those who don't have connectivity tools to access. Number two, the digital gap. There's digital natives, and there's other people who, like me, were not born in the digital area. And that is an issue not only for the citizens, but also for the judges and the justice operators. I've heard very attentively everything that has been shown and explained today. It is very important to know how you did it, because it proves that, yes, we can introduce changes, but we always need to respect these specificities of different societies. We have a justice which insists on doing deep changes. We have not been able to do so. We need the tools of digitalization, for instance, the e-file or record. Focusing on this dialogue that had been mentioned by the previous panel, because there's many players and agents and there's different agendas. We need to find a mechanism to coordinate and collaborate amongst the different institutions to be able to succeed in this type of a process. Now, specifically, being able to protect the citizen is important. The citizen who does not have access to the computer systems, protecting the citizens who are suffering from this digital gap, that is step number one in this pathway to find a formula to solve the pathway towards digitalization of the justice administration. If we are aware of the fact that our justice is delayed. There's a backlog of records and files, and they're old, all of them are physical. And if we can go towards digitalization, we shouldn't forget the rights of all citizens. As soon as we're aware of that, I'm convinced that we're going to progress. Yes, you're right, for sure. The right to have access to justice is a right of all citizens. So, yes, the digital gap cannot happen, and it will not happen. There will always be one office, there will be at least 1 or 2 or 3 people to serve those people who don't have access to an file or record because they don't have the connectivity, or just because they don't have the education, which might also be the case. And we're going to talk about education and training. So this same question is going to be for the 3 speakers, the 3 panelists. Digital transformation requires efforts from all of the operators, agents. Different agents have different interests, different agents have different pathways. But we have to talk about training. Is it important, is it essential to train on an ongoing manner the professionals of law so that they can adapt themselves to these new technologies and tools? If so, what are the strategies we could follow for this transition to be successful? Maria Jesus, thank you. The first answer is yes, clearly. Training is essential, absolutely. I would differentiate 2 things here. Number 1, for a successful transformation, right, or transition, you're talking about change management, which is immediate when a project is going to be implemented. And I think the impact, which has more effect on the life, which is more impactful on the life of the civil servant, is going from paper to 0 paper. That is a very relevant change. And yes, that has to be managed. How? Yes, there's different strategies, there's different ways of implementing it. And as Leticia said, everything has been invented. But there's 2 especially that I'd like to underline, especially 1, training. No doubt, you need to train the users in the new system, in the new way of working, so that they feel safe when they use the tool. Number 2, we need to support them. We need to go hand in hand with them. You cannot just give them, this is the new way you have to work, and let's see, in 1 month you tell me how you're doing. No, this is just the beginning. One of the panelists said, and I think it was you, said, this process is never ending. I totally agree. The process starts with the implementation and it continues. It's a constant improvement, and this ongoing improvement is a support to accompany them in incidents, improvements, needs, so that they use them. If they do not use them, if they have many problems, they're not going to use them. Easy example with the applications we use in the mobile. People adapted themselves very easily to Bizum because it's easy to do money transfers with Bizum. Everybody uses it in Spain. If they see that there's virtues in a style of work, we will use it, but you need to support them. And that's what I would like to refer to as change management. And ongoing training is important. You need to once and again train the user. Sometimes the problem of the success of some applications is that we give for granted that they know about them, or we don't insist too much on the training of the tool and the monitoring of its usability. And that was shown in different fora after the pandemic. One of the good practices was that we needed clearly to train in technological issues to the users. So I totally agree, and I could continue, but I am absolutely obsessed about training. It's so important. Yes, training. Yes, you're right. My question is about the other side of the coin, because obviously we all agree without training, we can't get anywhere. Not only in justice, but anywhere, especially because we're talking about a change such as digital transformation. So yes, initial training, support, ongoing education is important, because this is never ending. It's never going to end. Technology is always changing. It evolves very quickly. What is your perception, Maria Jesus, about the users of the system? What perception do you have with respect to their attitude to get that training? not just the initial training, but ongoing training, because they have to dedicate many hours from their time. How do you perceive that? How do you see that? Well, there might be some resistance, but we need to overcome them. And if you overcome that resistance is by giving them support, supporting the use of the tool, but also in solving the issues, the problems that are generated. What I perceived from my experience throughout the years was that initially they say no. No, the past was better. We've always been fine. No, give it an opportunity. And for that, what do you need? Well, sometimes, very often, you just need somebody just in front of you, sitting next to you to help you. So we need to understand that as part of the projects, we need the monitoring, the follow-up for their implementation. Sometimes there's wonderful tools, but they don't have sufficient support. They are not successful because there was not somebody next there or a training project to overcome that initial resistance. And obviously, then we need to always look for allies, proactive people. There's always going to be proactive people. There's always going to be people who are convinced about the fact that things need to improve, that we cannot continue having paper with stamps of 5 departments. There's other ways to act. And that people are the people that you need to help so that they generate trust, so that they dynamize and move the projects and help the groups. After the no, has there been a lot of yes? Oh, yes. What you see is that we would never go back to the previous system. That's what we have. So that's good. Yes, you're right. You're totally right. Candance, the same question. What do we do with training? Is it necessary? What's the strategies we use?
And yes, it's necessary, it's critical. I don't think we can have effective digital transformation without training, so I totally endorse what Maria Jesus would have said. What I would add to, because you've made such great points already, but what I would add to that is to say also, we need to assess the capabilities of the users. And the users are broad. The users are inclusive of lawyers, inclusive of your average man in the street who might be litigating for himself. So we need to ensure that we are assessing the different levels of capabilities of the different types of users. So training can be broad, yes, general training, general information in terms of how these new systems work, but also specific to the type of user that is going to be engaging with the system to ensure that it's reaching them. What I also find, and I'm always surprised that we don't use the tools that people are already accustomed using. So some people are accustomed to using their cell phone. They have no difficulty using their cell phone to access social media, to access websites. But when you ask them to use a computer, they are more apprehensive, when really it can do the same thing. They both can do the same functions. So sometimes we need to make things accessible in a way that people are more comfortable with, especially in the beginning stages of any transformation project. So change management, of course, deals with that. But sometimes it's just a matter of making it accessible to them in a way they're already comfortable with. And then you take steps from there. And one other point I would also add is that before effecting the change and then training, we need to make sure that we have that dialogue, those task groups, so that people understand that the change is coming. They can appreciate how it can benefit and make life easier. And then when it actually comes on board, it doesn't catch them by, it wouldn't catch them by surprise. They're not, apprehensive as they might have been if they had not known before. The COVID pandemic showed us how quickly most people adapt to digital transformation and things as simple as having meetings. Now people hardly have meetings in person because they see how much more time efficient it is to have a virtual meeting. So you find that in-person meetings are things of the past. And that's just because we were forced to operate in a new system. But it was done in a way that people felt comfortable. So I think that would be my contribution in terms of what type of training and how that can really assist in the transformation. Thank you.
Pues la verdad que has puesto...
In fact, you have stressed many important things: information and also pedagogy and the way we manage change, and we need to insist on this. And it's true, we speak about digital divide of users and the citizens, but also public servants. There are differences among them. The younger ones are digital natives, but not those of us here in this panel, at least, of course, Candance is younger, but we all had to do an important effort to adapt. When we started working, we just had a telephone and a notebook, and we had to adapt to computers, to APPs, to electronic files. So what happens to us and to all civil servants in the justice system? And as you said, three important things: information, training, and the digital divide also exist among public servants. It's now your turn, your opinion. I will add something to what Maria Jesus said. I believe that we need to be focused on training and training of new professionals that will be part of the justice system in the future. At least I believe in Ecuador we need to have a relationship with the universities where the syllabus includes artificial intelligence applied to law, all those subjects. So these disruptive technologies have to be present in the studies of the new professionals, and this is an ongoing process. But we also need a process of training those that are currently in the system, and this training has to do with the tools that will be incorporated in the digital transformation processes in justice administration. So training in these lines is important for future professionals, training of current professionals, but also training to the public, to the citizens, so they are aware of the transformation and they get to be used to this transformation. Well, yes, indeed. If you don't want to add anything else or any final reflection, if this is not the case, I would like to thank you again for being here with us today. As I said in my introduction, this is a forum to exchange ideas, knowledge, and I wasn't wrong because it was very fruitful. Thank to all of you for your highly valuable contributions. We're learning from each other. We take good note of everything you said. Thank you, welcome, and enjoy the rest of the week. We hope that it's going to be very pleasant and fruitful. And with this, we conclude this panel discussion. Thank you.
Gestión del cambio, intercambio de conocimientos.
Management to exchange knowledge. I believe that those topics are not only part of the transformation of justice, but also other ministries and private firms. We know that some lessons can be transferred to other ministries and other companies. As I said, thank you, Esther, for your excellent presentation. Now, we're going to give the floor to the representative of the Inter-American Development Bank that will close this session. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Thank you. Thank you all. I'd like to thank the panelists, those that are with us and listening to us from YouTube. On top of some of the reflections, I'd like to highlight at least two things. The first, that was part of the opening and is relevant to all countries. We need the justice system to have the citizens at their center. The optimization of judicial services will not make sense if it's not going to improve people's lives, citizens' lives. And digitalization as a tool has to be at the center of to optimize processes with tools like electronic records, cybersecurity, but at the end of the day, if we don't focus all of this on the citizens, this will not make much sense. And something else that has also been mentioned by the panelists, we are going to start different processes, and those are ongoing processes that require training, ongoing training, feedback with all the stakeholders to see how can we go on improving. So this is not a static process, it's a continuous process, and the citizen should be at the center of everything we do. And something else, and as we have seen with the participation of the Ministry of the Presidency, Justice and the relations with the Parliament, with the Audiencia Nacional and the Supreme Court, and many bodies that have to work in coordination so that all those transformation processes are effective, meet their deadlines, and the citizens can receive their services in a right and timely manner. As Emilio said, it's a great honor and pleasure for the Inter-American Development Bank to be a vehicle for this type of discussions that help us to improve our public policies, that enhance transfer of knowledge. And I would also like to thank Casa de America as a beautiful venue for these discussions. I believe the discussion has been highly fruitful and interesting, and in the next few days we will go on with this valuable information. I would like to thank Spain and the Spanish government for its contribution to this week. Thank you all, and we will see each other soon.
Muchas gracias, Juan Carlos. Excelente conclusiones a los dos paneles.
Thank you. Excellent conclusions to the two panelists, and thank you. And with this, well, we come to an end. All's good that ends well. So we're going to close this panel and the streaming dissemination. Thank you to the Ministry and to the Secretary of State. Thanks to all of the panelists. Thanks to the BID team for making this broadcasting possible. And above all, thank you all to those of you who followed us via YouTube. Let's go to edition number 5 next year. Thank you. And number 4, actually.